Hey guys, Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Normally this is the part where we would recap the last episode, but we might as well save that for later, because we finished off the 5th Doctor's era of classic Doctor Who, and now we are doing our retrospective, because we honestly can't be bothered. We're going to have a break next week anyway. I should mention that, by the way. Next week, there won't be a new episode of Doctor Who Classic, not technically, even though there's not one this week either, but there'll just be a full break, no video or anything. We'll be back the next week after that for to round off season 21 with the Twin Dilemma to start off the 6th Doctor's era. So yeah, normally at the end of every Doctor, we go through and we give brief opinions on all of the episodes, or in the case of the last time, we did an entire tier list. Not doing that today.
Well, we only have 3 seasons this time. We had, 7 seasons the time before?
Yeah, so we only have 20 stories from the 5th Doctor, and that's it. So I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I'm not going to edit it as much as I did the tier list episode, so if you're expecting me to put in more clips from all of our reactions, I just frankly don't have the time to do that. So we're just going to go back to the normal thing. We're just going to talk about each of these, and I guess we could do like a thumbs up, thumbs down rating system.
As much as I remember these.
Yeah, so...
Now, before we start, I was reading this morning that today, when we are recording, which is December the 16th?
Yes.
That 50 years ago today was the introduction of Sarah Jane into the 3rd Doctor's. This was her first episode with the Sontarans and everything, and it talked about how introducing Sarah Jane kind of changed the whole dynamic of Doctor Who, because instead of being like a lot of the previous female companions, she was... it didn't want to say that she was a feminist, but it basically said that she could hold her own, whereas many of the previous young females who had been part of the cast, not including Barbara, of course, Barbara's our favorite, my favorite anyway, but she completely changed the dynamic of what a companion was like, a female companion was like.
Yeah, I could see that compared to her immediate predecessor, which was Jo, and Jo's great, everyone loves Jo, but Sarah Jane definitely... is sort of the template upon which, Romana and Nyssa and then a lot of the later modern companions are based on. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And the other thing I remember from that was that first Sontaran episode, set in the Middle Ages, was perhaps the best of all the Sontaran episodes that we have seen so far.
Yes. And considering the Sontaran episodes I remember from Modern Who, it probably still is the best Sontaran episode. So, but we are here for the 5th Doctor's era.
The 5th Doctor.
So let's just get straight into it with Castrovalva.
All right, this is where the Doctor regenerates. He goes to this place because his regeneration, something was very wrong with it. I guess it's because of the... I don't know, the way that Tom Baker regenerated, I don't know exactly, but he goes into this literally MC Escher type world where things are not what they seem, and you go out one door and you seem to come into the town on the other side at the exact... So anyway, interesting plot. If I recall correctly, the Master is involved in it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but it did, to me, set the scene for the next couple of episodes where the Doctor was not confident, didn't know what he was doing. I mean, he was such a complete contrast, not only to Tom Baker, but also to Pertwee and Troughton and Hartnell, that it took us a while, it took me a while to get acclimated to this new guy, because he literally did not, and it's not the actor's fault. It seemed to me that's what the writers were trying to do, and I didn't quite understand what exactly they were going for there.
Yeah, and pretty much since the last episode we watched, I've been going through... there's a channel, I'm sure a lot of Doctor Who fans have seen it, I think called Clever Dick Films, where they have a huge retrospective of Doctor Who, and I did watch some of them, not all of them, but I watched the one for the 5th Doctor, and one of the things that stuck out to me was that Peter Davison really struggled getting the Doctor's character over the course of 3 seasons, and really only found it towards the end.
Yeah.
So, and especially like once he had, I think it is in the Caves of Androzani that, you know, the Doctor sacrifices himself for Perry and everything, and that was the moment he was like, ooh, now I kind of regret leaving because we finally figured out what I'm doing here, but it was too late. So, yeah, and I give a little bit of grace on the first episode because a lot of Doctor first stories tend to be, you know, the Doctor, he's, you know, way out of his mind. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's trying to reshape himself into a new man. So I kind of give that a little grace period. But yeah, there was a lot in this where it's like, yeah, this is not the same Doctor that we've watched.
Now, when Pertwee stumbled out of the TARDIS, it took him like one episode of the 4 to finally get back to where he was and recognizing Lethbridge Stewart and the others and everything, and they were recognizing him. And Tom Baker literally just popped out and said, hey, I'm the new Doctor, here we go. Tried on a couple of silly outfits and came out finally with the one that goes, all right, let's get... And he was right into it. And that's, again, I think what threw us off. We've now watched 5 Doctors, and this is the only one where we went into it going, what is he thinking? What are the writers thinking? What is the showrunner, the producer thinking? It's just, it didn't seem to gel right away.
I also get the feeling that's just going to continue into the Colin Baker era, because I'm pretty sure that entire era is nobody knew what they were doing with this Doctor. And I've heard, like, one of the things with Colin Baker is he's so much better in the audio dramas because they figured out, like, what do we want to do with this guy?
Yeah.
And he's figured out what he wants to do with the performance. So,
we must have just gotten haircuts on that day because my hair looks excessively short in that thumbnail.
Probably. So... and we can give it a rating. The old Roman thumbs up rating. What are we going to give this one?
Well, again, with a lot of reservations, I'd give it a
yeah. I give it a petering, maybe leaning up kind of. Yeah. It's not a bad episode. The story with Castrovalva itself is good. The Master is always really fun. So. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Since it is the first episode with this Doctor, it is general that we would say, is it better than Power of the Daleks? Because that's always our controversial opinion that we go back to.
I'd give this about a C+. Again, the problem with the Power of the Daleks was, again, it was such an odd choice to start that Doctor.
Yeah.
Because, again, he seemed to be not the focus of that episode. And my understanding was that was filmed out of sequence. That was like the third one they filmed, but they showed it first. And anyway, that one struck us as odd because the Doctor didn't literally seem to be doing anything in that. And it was Ben and Polly, who were literally doing everything in that episode.
Yeah. I feel like I understood this more than Power of the Daleks, and I probably enjoyed it a bit more. So that's our controversial measuring stick for First Doctor, for an episode, the first episode of a Doctor. So
I guess we're going to find out when we get back to the 6th Doctor.
That'll be something, because that episode does not have a good reputation. Yeah. Next up was 4 to Doomsday.
If I recall, these were some people who were trying to seek immortality.
It was something like that. They had like all the different humans from the different times, and I think most of them were androids.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was something like that, or they were trying to achieve enlightenment or something. But I remember really enjoying this. And again, it was also kind of a good, like, you know, the Doctor is starting to figure himself out, you know, much more. And one thing I liked in this episode was the scene where it's just the 4 of them in the brig or their quarters or whatever on this ship, and they all just kind of sit down and they talk about what's going on and they try to piece things together. And I thought that was a really good scene that is just kind of weird that Doctor Who doesn't do most of the time. So, they're laying out the facts. We're hearing everyone's mindset. Everyone has good opinions on it, or, they have something to bring to it. Adric has, the math. Nissa is just generally smart. Tegan kind of brings the humanity. The Doctor brings his point of view. And I just really enjoyed that scene. And I thought the villains were also really good in this one.
Yeah, and the makeup, this is no Draconians. Was that it?
Yeah.
But the very reptilian makeup on this guy was really good.
Yeah, definitely. And then just seeing all the different people scooped up from time was interesting. There was that good moment where Tegan was able to talk to the Australian Aborigine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was a really interesting touch too. So this one, I'd probably say just a good thumbs up.
Yeah.
On that one.
I'd give it a B+.
Next up was Kinda.
All right.
Let's open this wound last time.
No, let's not even open it up. This just no. I don't get it. I didn't get it. I didn't get it the first time. I don't get it the second time. I know a lot of the viewers have tried to explain it to us. Again, with no background in, Buddhism or whatever it is they were trying to come across here. If that's what they were trying for, and there were people who understood it, good on you. We didn't get it. I didn't get it. I still think this is one of the worst Doctor Who episodes ever, because to me, if this is still a show for the average 12-year-old, although there's still, 20 kids who are now in their 30s who had been watching since Hartnell's era, a 12-year-old would not have understood this in the least. You had that stock character of the British military man running the whole thing, and it went nowhere, and it went nowhere fast, and it never got better.
You had the military guys who, the one guy who went crazy, and while I was watching this, I was like, okay, now I'm going to understand. Now that we're watching it again, I'm ready. Like, why did he go crazy? He just did. Like, okay, I kind of thought it was like the Kinda or the Mara's influence or something, but no, just go ahead and give it the big old thumbs down. Yeah, that one.
Sorry.
Whew, it was rough. So we move on to The Visitation. This was our pseudo-historical episode. This is where they went back and there was like the plague going around. They met the Highwaymen.
Okay, yeah. Now the Highwayman, great character.
Yeah.
I thought they were considering bringing him on as a companion because he is somewhat of a swashbuckler. He could have been the Muscle. He could have been Peter Purvis. What was his character's name?
Stephen.
He could have been, the new Ian, because let's face it, Adric was never that.
Yeah.
And if you need, and I realized, Tom Baker didn't need that Harry because, Tom Baker was the Muscle, but the Highwayman would have been a great addition, and yet he stayed there. And but again, overall, I like the historicity of it, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And the alien parts of it, that's fine. And I understand that Doctor Who by this point says we can't have a historical without some kind of science fiction or aliens in it, and that's fine as long as they integrate it and make it work, which they did here.
I don't fully remember what the plan of the alien was. I remember we did enjoy the alien on this one. I just can't remember fully what it was.
Well, the thing I remember is at the end they start the Great Fire of London.
Yes.
Which is now, twice that the Doctor has been there accidentally destroying a city, because they were there when Nero burned Rome.
Yeah.
And essentially they helped the Trojans burn down, or helped the Greeks burn down Troy.
Yeah. So if the Doctor ever goes to a city, run, basically. So but I remember this one being good as well. And I remember he had like the robot that was sort of perceived as like the Grim Reaper going through, and I can't remember the plan per se. Yeah. But overall,
definitely
this one was good.
Liked it, yeah.
Next up was the last of the pure historicals, Black Orchid.
And I know this doesn't have a good reputation, but we enjoyed it. I think didn't we say our problem was they spent the entire first episode setting it up.
Yeah.
And then there was literally no place to go in the second episode.
Yeah, because the thing is, having it being a two-parter, in order to really get the, you can have the story, start getting going, but it has to lead to that cliffhanger, which would be, the person dying. And so, but that was at the end of the first part, so the second part had to do all of the action, basically, of the mystery. So, the formatting was a little off, but otherwise, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
So.
And you got to watch the Doctor play cricket.
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of explains his cricket outfit.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I give it A- B+. Again, I know it doesn't have a great reputation, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, so. Next up was Earthshock once again.
The return of the Cybermen.
Yes.
And I think one of their better episodes, because sometimes before they've been manipulated by who was the actor that played Mavic Chen, and even the what was the one when they were in the cave and they were being brought out of frozen.
That was Tomb
of the Cyber. Yeah, a lot of those were good, but in this one they had a plan. We're going to do this, and they had nobody else guiding them, and they were ready to essentially go back and destroy the Earth, and essentially. The Doctor was able... Oh, and had a really good female captain. Can't remember, Beryl somebody, I think, was the female captain of the ship. Again, all around, enjoyed it. And then, of course, at the end, Adric has been griping for so long that nobody takes him seriously, this, that, and the other. And finally he says, I'm going to stay and try to figure out how to steer the ship away. Ends up crashing the ship into the Earth, which, of course, ends up destroying all the dinosaurs.
Yeah. So... This should also be a good point, because, I have no idea how long this video is going to go. So, let's give sort of final thoughts, the discussion on Adric as a companion.
They set him up as a mathematical genius and then never used that.
Yeah.
He was very young, which means he, in many ways, his adolescence detracted from the show because he seemed like a whiny teenager who didn't... See, that's the thing I've always said from the beginning, because I was there when it started. The companions should have a purpose. All right? Barbara and Ian were there with a purpose. They were the teachers who got caught up in this trip with the Doctor and his granddaughter, who allowed the audience to hear from them things that they might not otherwise have known or have forgotten. All right? That was the template to me. Adric didn't fit into that template. He wasn't the muscle.
Yeah.
He didn't add anything historical. He was certainly... I mean, he kind of fit into the Susan mold in that he was a teenager who tended to screw things up.
Yeah. I think it may have honestly helped if they didn't have Nyssa, because Nyssa was basically just another Romana.
Yeah.
And so by having Nyssa there, it just completely overshadows anything that Adric could bring to the table. Because, if you have Adric and Tegan, sure, Adric has the mathematical excellence and stuff like that. But having Nyssa there, which was not their original plan anyway, it just doesn't work. It kind of puts him in a place where it's like, well... What does he have? Well, he can complain about the girls, and that's pretty much it. And honestly, then the other thing is just clashing with the Fifth Doctor. Yeah. He was not a good match for the Fifth Doctor. He's not really a good match for the Fourth Doctor, but at the very least, because of the Fourth Doctor with his characterization and how Tom Baker played it, if Adric said anything, I just think of a moment of... I think there was some moment in Logopolis where the Fourth Doctor just kind of takes him, puts his arm over him and basically just says, shut up. And then they move on with the scene. Yeah. And it works because the Fourth Doctor can just do that, and you just kind of accept it. The Fifth Doctor can't really do that, and instead just gets more and more frustrated, and you understand it, so the audience is more and more frustrated with this whole thing going on.
And of course, we found out through the comments that many of the actors, apparently, on the series didn't appreciate him either.
Yeah.
Just as a person.
I think someone actually said that when they were filming the scene of Adric's death that Nyssa and Tegan, they had to be careful that they didn't show themselves smiling or laughing while the camera was, sort of away from them, because they were just too happy to get rid of Adric. So he's he's Adric, not great. Earthshock, a great episode.
Yes.
But Adric himself, I think, is just a character. It's just sort of a bad storm of a character they didn't know what to do with, and an actor who couldn't pull off anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was like, kind of like Victoria, the one that they picked up when her father, the Daleks, time traveled back to the 1890s. Anyway, she was a character who, because of her time, did not fit in with everything else that was going on. Now, of all of those, Jamie.
That's the thing I was about to bring up. Is it's funny saying that when she had episodes with Jamie, but Jamie is like a miracle that he works. He's one of the absolute best companions.
Yes, but because he was a young man in his particular time who was essentially stuck in a role that he was never going to go anywhere, given the opportunity then to go with the Doctor and to learn these things, he jumped on that. He took that. And again, that's why to us, Jamie is one of the best companions ever, is that he literally grew in his role as the Doctor's companion until he was returned home and his memory was wiped.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with like Leela, where it's like there's sort of almost a go with the flow kind of character. It's like they don't need to be, they don't need to get caught up in all of this, science or futuristic nonsense. They just kind of work, They'll just go in. If they don't understand something, that's one thing. But often they'll figure out what they can do with what they understand.
Yeah. And see, Nyssa did that, where I thought Tegan never did. Tegan never did seem to understand how to go with the flow.
Yeah, and we'll get to Tegan. Next up was Time Flight.
Is this the one where the plane went back in time from Heathrow and landed, a couple of million years?
Yeah, it landed in like an alternate Heathrow, and it was on another planet that the Master was using for some reason, and he like trapped them all there. So,
but they cobbled the two planes together and juiced it up with the TARDIS or something, and they all managed to get back. Again, kind of a convoluted storyline, but again, nothing objectionable about it.
Yeah, it was entertaining at least. And the Master, I mean, Anthony Ainley, and I guess we can talk about this because, I mean, this character is just going to keep going, but with Anthony Ainley, like, it was a little weird at first, but it's like just any time I feel like they just sort of let him go, and it's like, yes, he's very obviously supposed to be Roger Delgado again, but I feel like they make him like weirdly campier and just having a bit more fun, to where it's like, just kind of go, just sort of crack the smile, even though Delgado can do that, like they don't have a lot of the somewhat intimidating moments that Delgado could have. And I feel like that just kind of works as just a more campy, like every time he shows up, he takes off, whatever mask he has, and it's like, oh, it's him, there we go again. And I don't know, it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, other than that,
yes,
it was fine. Yeah. It was good.
BB plus.
Yeah. Next up was Arc of Infinity. Which was good. I will say, like, it would almost be a tad better if it wasn't Omega specifically, because, like, he was so good in the Three Doctors that now having him back and not really having him be exactly the same as he was, it's, I don't know, it's not as good, but it's still an overall really good story. Yeah. So.
And again, until you mentioned him, and I'm looking at the thumbnail going, I've forgotten completely what Arc of Infinity was about. But wasn't he trying to steal the Doctor's body?
Something like that. Like, he had a whole, like, plot on Gallifrey, which also included like where his TARDIS was on Earth in the Netherlands, and that's how they brought Tegan back into that one. And then like at the end of it, he like his face or shell, like, he pulled that off and it revealed to be the Doctor's face, and then they had that like 10-minute chase through the Netherlands. So but yeah, this was also the first episode. I'm pretty sure this was the first episode where I was watching this and I was like, boy, they really forgot what to do with Barusa. Like, this was the first one where he's just kind of there. He's kind of, he doesn't really offer that much, and it's like, well, that's kind of a shame.
Yeah. Because
I thought he was a really interesting character in The Invasion of Time, which was not a very good story, but this one was good, even if it's not as good as the Three Doctors, but that's really hard to do anyway. Yeah. So
this is the one with Tegan's nephew.
Yeah.
They were sleeping in the sewers or something like that.
They were like in the crypt.
Crypt, yeah.
And then they got attacked by like a goat monster or something. I don't remember what it was.
All right.
Next up was Snake Dance, the Kinda sequel.
The one thing I will say about this is that it was one of the few sequels better than the original.
Yes, I did enjoy this more.
Because it had a coherent plot that didn't rely on a whole bunch of mysticism.
Yeah. And it's definitely a thing of, like, you have to forget what the Mara is established to be in Kinda. If you forget all about that, because you're just going to have too many questions that aren't going to be answered. So it's better to just come into this as its own thing. And as its own thing, it works out, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, just the whole plot, Tegan getting possessed by the Mara again, but there was the local, like, prince kind of guy, and he kind of gets possessed, and then there's the people, they're studying the Mara, like, history and stuff like that. It was all more or less pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So. And then people got eaten by snakes. So.
As people are wont to do.
Next up was Modron Undead, our introduction to Turlo.
Okay. Now, interesting plot, especially in that it brings back Lethbridge Stewart.
Yes.
But he doesn't remember the Doctor.
He didn't have his mustache.
Doesn't have his mustache. It's like set in 78 and 83, so there's like only 5 years difference between the two plots. And again, the plot basically is, are they Time Lords? I couldn't remember if they were Time Lords, but these were people
they wanted to be Time Lords. They wanted to, like, crack immortality or gain regenerations, but it just sort of destroyed. I mean, technically they are immortal, and now they're looking for a way to die because their bodies are just so broken, basically. Yeah. And we see the Brigadier. Somehow he's lost his memories. He has to be reminded of the Doctor, and there's this whole thing of, he had some kind of a nervous breakdown or something, and eventually we see that the reason for that is when he meets his past self, and they interact, it causes this whole thing, which solves the problem that was going on, and that makes the younger Brigadier forget these things going into this episode. So all of that was really, really interesting. On top of, the Black Guardian is back.
Yeah, up front, the whole season with the Black Guardian in the background did not work as well as I think they wanted it to.
And it's interesting because I see people that really, really like the Black Guardian in the comments, and I just don't see it, because to me, he's not like Davros, where, Davros, yes, and we'll get to Davros in a bit, but, Davros, he'll yell and he'll have these, crazy, egomaniacal, megalomaniac plans, but he's still really interesting with how he created the Daleks, how he wants to control the Daleks, his debates with the Doctor about, upgrading the Daleks or giving them emotions or anything. Like, all of that is interesting, but with the Black Guardian, I just don't see what we're going for, because he's just, like, I kind of get in the, the Key of Time season, but he also wasn't in that season very much.
Yeah.
This was, he shows up, he says, you have to kill the doctor. Schoolboy, who will confirm is an alien, lieutenant or something later. So, I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. He's just big bad guy screaming, "Kill the doctor."
Yeah.
So
if you discount the Black Guardians part of this, it was actually a good episode.
Yeah. And an interesting. I mean, it is still an interesting idea of having a companion like Turlo, join, but he wants to kill the doctor. So, so that was kind of interesting. But the rest of it is really good.
Yeah.
So,
good to see Lethbridge Stewart again.
Yeah. Next up was Terminus.
Probably the best thing about that was the way Nyssa left.
Yeah.
Finally you get another person who leaves for the right reason. Not just, hey, I can't keep you here anymore, I'm going to drop you off in the middle of nowhere. Or like Steven, doctor says, I can't stay here, but this guy will be good for you. He's going, seriously?
Yeah.
But yeah, she says, this is who I am. I am a scientist, and I think if I stay here on the plague ship, I can figure out how to cure it, and I can actually be of usefulness to these people. So she decides to stay behind.
Yeah. Which I guess this could lead into our discussion of Nyssa. She was kind of there, but when she had moments where it was just her and the doctor, I think that's the way they should have gone from the beginning.
Yeah. I think her overall story arc was hampered by the fact that she was stuck with Adric and Tegan.
Yeah.
I think if it had been Nyssa and the doctor, that would have been as good as Tom Baker and Romana 1.
Yeah. So, I could even, accept having Tegan in there if they have this sort of, almost sisterly bond, and, maybe she can teach Tegan some things, but with Adric, even though Adric was the original companion and Nyssa was brought in sort of as an afterthought, it just doesn't work with them.
Yeah.
And any moment where it was just the doctor and Nyssa, it really felt like, all right, this is what we should have had the whole time. So
yeah, and the twist there where the big bad wolf turned out to not be the big bad wolf. He was set up in the mythology of the people on the plague ship that he was, I don't know, kidnapping people, eating them, killing them, whatever, and he turns out not to be that at all. That was kind of an interesting twist.
Yeah. So overall, another good episode.
Yeah.
And this was also the episode where Tegan and Turlo, they didn't really have anything for them to do, so they just sort of put them in the ventilation system for 4 episodes.
In the Nakatomi Tower.
Oh, yeah. Next up was Enlightenment to round out the trilogy of the Black Guardian.
Now, again, without the Black Guardian, although part of the plot was again trying to engineer the Doctor's demise.
Yeah.
The idea of the spaceships that looked like sailing ships, and they were in a race where the prize was enlightenment, although they never actually said what the enlightenment was. The Doctor figured it out at the very end and decided to let the one particular ship win because he knew that would essentially be the end of that ship.
Oh, yeah.
Again, an overall interesting episode that could have benefited more from less of the Black Guardian and even the Black Guardian.
Yeah, so
I can't remember why do we have pigeon heads on or seagull heads?
Because they have birds on their heads.
Oh, okay.
So, and which was the weirdest design choice that they had birds and their hair. So I just sort of fashioned that together. So,
and I probably mentioned at that time when I directed A Midsummer Night's Dream for Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park in 1985, my Oberon had a black crow type outfit. He had the wings and then he had something that didn't have the actual face, but it was a headdress that did have a kind of a widow's peak that kind of looked like the beak, but it was very effective because he was very creepy looking as Oberon, the King of the Shadows.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, and this end of the Black Guardian, good riddance. I don't see it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Next up was The King's Demons, which was a good first 2 episodes to a story that doesn't finish.
Yeah. Although it introduced the chameleon, which apparently everybody thought was going to be great, but it wasn't, because it was literally an actual robot that they lost the instructions to and didn't know how to operate it.
Yeah, like the guy, the only person who knew how to operate it died. And then they were just like, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to work this thing, so...
And didn't figure out that even though Star Wars had come along by this time, they knew how to do the C-3PO type stuff, they didn't figure out how to build a new costume that they could actually put a person inside.
Yeah, so...
But this was King John, and they were trying to, I don't know, disrupt the signing of the Magna Carta.
Because this was the bad version of King John, which is an interesting statement. Apparently King John was a good king overall, according to the Doctor. I don't know what was going on here, but the somewhat simple plan of time is going to be disrupted because the Master is here, and he has some sort of plan. So
now, again, if our viewers from the UK could enlighten me, I have never heard any stories of John being a great king. Now, aside from the fact that I was in King John, the Shakespeare version, and I know Shakespeare was, trying to make John look worse. All of the other things that I've ever read about him was that he was just a petty little snot-nosed kid who grew up to be an even pettier adult. Always in his brother's shadow. He adored Richard, but also hated him because Richard got all the adulation and John got nothing. And I've never heard anybody who speaks well of John. And again, the fact that there are no other King Johns in the 800 or 900 years since his reign says something about that. So that made no sense when he said that King John was actually a good king, and it was like no, not that I've ever heard.
Yeah. So otherwise, again, it's a fine episode, but it really just sort of stops, and I don't know where they were going to go with it, if they were going to go anywhere with it, or what. Yeah. But
and I can't remember if I told you this either. In the play, The Lion in Winter, John is a 16-year-old boy, and at one point he complains about how much not only his brothers Richard and Geoffrey hate him, but how his mother Eleanor and his father Henry hate him too. He says something to the effect of, "My God, if I was on fire, none of you would pee on me to put me out." And Richard looks at him and says, "Well, let's strike a flint and see." I mean, that's John's reputation, that nobody would pee on him to put him out if he was on fire.
Yeah, so... Next up was The Five Doctors. This is one of those, I may have gone a little too far in the thumbnail, but here we are. So
yes, because you have Hartnell there, and unfortunately poor Mr. Hartnell had passed away by this time. And the guy who replaced him, the guy who played him, was not bad.
Yeah. It's interesting, I always find, like, with the newer versions of the first Doctor, and a lot of people will say this, that they tend to be a bit too grumpy. And Hartnell was.
He was grumpy.
He was grumpy, but he was grumpy at specific things. Like, sometimes they just do, like, he could be respectful and whimsical and all that stuff, but there is a lot of times where it's just like, all right, man, calm down. He wasn't always like that. So,
yeah. And once again, this is complete reversal for Borusa. When we first met him, we really liked him. And again, that one story where he was talking about how, to Tom Baker about, Doctor, you were always a piece of work back in school and back in the academy, etc.
Yeah.
And here he turns out to be completely evil. Not understanding that if you get what you're wanting, it could turn out to be a sentence that you're not completely aware of. So,
yeah. Now, as an anniversary special, it's good. Comparing it to the Three Doctors is kind of where I'm like, oh, that's hard. Because the Three Doctors, I think, is just really, really good. And the dynamic between the Third Doctor and the Second Doctor just works so well.
Yeah.
Whereas here, there's not really a dynamic between all of the Doctors because they don't really meet each other that much.
Yeah. And the fifth Doctor is kind of sidelined in this one.
Yeah.
The fourth Doctor isn't there at all.
Right.
So it still goes back to being basically about Troughton and Pertwee. And now, is this Herndl?
Yeah.
Okay. But again, they don't all come together until the very end. So it's kind of a mishmash. It's fun to see them together. It was fun to see the companions pop back up as holograms or whatever. So, but yeah, compared to the three Doctors, it's not as good.
Yeah, it's like a 90%. Yeah. Like it's still really, really good. Next up was Warriors from the Deep. This one is one of those interesting ones that we enjoyed this episode, and then I went to the comments and saw people that didn't enjoy that, and it's like, ooh, that doesn't happen very often. that we enjoy something that they don't. But yeah, this one was all right. This one was good.
This is the one with the samurai sea devils.
Yes.
And the Silurians.
Yes.
And again, a somewhat complicated, convoluted plot. Is this the one where the Doctor fell into the water and ruined his suit?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it was enjoyable.
Yeah. And with the standard base under siege, and there was the whole plot of the Silurians want to have the humans basically, spark a conflict between the humans and, whatever Cold War is going on, and it would destroy all the humans, and then they could take over the Earth again. But then there was also a subplot of a saboteur on the base that was going to basically just do that anyway. So it's a little muddy, but I think what really works is the ending where, they basically have to kill all the Silurians and all the Sea Devils. Again, the Doctor failed them again, and you really see that kind of anguish on the Doctor's face. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that, especially from Peter Davison, which we'll get like a couple more times in this season, where he just sees that, like, well, I had to do it again, and it just eats him up. Yeah. So,
well, again, I think we referenced it when we watched it. There was the first or second time of the Silurians where he made a deal with them that everybody was going to coexist peacefully, even if they weren't aware of each other. But then Unit or somebody ended up bombing the Silurian compound and killing them all. That was not his fault.
Yeah, it was the Brigadier who made that choice. So yeah. But overall, like, there was some interesting stuff in this, and there was the Mithra monster thing that was going through, like the big sea devil creature.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So overall is good. Next up was The Awakening. Technically a pseudo-historical, even if it took place in the present day.
Yeah.
So
Roundheads and Cavaliers, bunch of reenactors. Who took themselves way too seriously.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently in the comments somebody said that they do still stuff like that. They still do it in some places there in the UK. And again, I know we have Civil War reenactors especially who do like the Battle of Gettysburg and places. We have one here in Oklahoma we mentioned. What I'm trying to figure out is I don't think we actually do the American Revolutionary War. Now, I know that the Yorktown Center, they have, I know they have that, interactive thing because we went there, but I don't know that they actually reenact the Battle of Yorktown. And of course, War of 1812, nothing to reenact unless you want to go burn down the White House and Congress.
Well, I'm sure there are some people that want to do that, but legally.
And I probably mentioned this before. When I taught Oklahoma history and had to lead up to how we got to Oklahoma, had to go through the American Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. I always told my students, to be very honest, the United States did not win either of those wars. All right, militarily speaking, we got our backsides kicked mightily both times. The only reason that we won considered to win the First War, is that the American Revolutionary War was so incredibly expensive for the British that ultimately it was decided that we were not worth it anymore. It was going to be cheaper for them to simply cut us loose and let us, make it on our own, which none of them believed that we really would, because somebody finally said, look, even if we win this war and we subdue the colonists militarily, how much more money are we going to have to spend to keep a military force in North America to prevent a second uprising? So that's when Parliament finally said, look, just cut them loose, let them, rise or fall on their own. The War of 1812, the only reason, again, that the British decided to sign a peace treaty was that they had bigger fish to fry. All right, they were fighting both the United States and Napoleon's forces in Europe, and therefore said, look, the United States, all they want us to do is stop stealing their men off their ships, et cetera, et cetera. We can do that because we need to take care of this Napoleon guy once and for all. After that, President James K. Polk threatened a third war over the Oregon Territory. By that time, the British said, look, just give the Americans what they want. It isn't worth fighting for. They got to keep British Columbia and whatever the parts of the province just east of that are. We got essentially Washington, Oregon, and parts of Idaho and Montana, and I think a little bit of Wyoming. So, again, the British looked at that territory and went, there's nothing really there. We have plenty of logging money coming from Vancouver Island. We have plenty of the fur trade still coming from there, so they want everything below the 49th parallel. Just give it to them. After that, we become great friends. The British refused to intercede on behalf of the South during the American Civil War, and of course we now have everybody calls it the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States now. So we've been great friends for 150 years, almost.
But a win is a win in my book, so...
Anyway, so those of you, our friends in the United Kingdom, you guys kicked our butts. There's no denying that.
But the awakening.
Sorry about that.
But still, this was a good episode. I think this actually benefited from being two parts. Like, it didn't drag out at all. Like, it was a very interesting story. You get in, you get out. And just the whole dynamic of, it's kind of historical, but not really, because it is in 1984. They don't have to, get certain angles to get rid of the power lines and everything. It's like, no, well, the power lines are there. It's all fine. But it's just very intense LARPers. You did get the one guy from the past who was sort of brought in to the present day, which was interesting. And I just thought this one was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Especially the costumes.
Yeah. Next up was Frontios.
Now, this was the Tractators?
Yes.
All right. Again, we made, I know I made allusions to Devil in the Dark from the original Star Trek series. These giant mole worm-like creatures are burrowing their way through the planet. I couldn't remember what for specifically.
I think they were doing a thing of like they sort of mine out the core of a planet, and then I think they put in an engine so that they can pilot the planet to other places. So, but yeah, and we learned that this is what happened to Turlough's world long before Turlough was born.
So
and
the first hint really of any of his background.
Yeah.
Other than that one time he said something about, I hate Earth, I'd like to go to my own planet. There was some reference, I can't remember if it was before this or it was during this episode.
Yeah.
He made a reference to the fact that he wasn't from Earth.
Yeah. So, but it was interesting. It was sort of like base under siege, and you had the military leaders that they immediately don't trust the Doctor, but they kind of maybe not smooth things over, but they were at least sensible about some of this stuff. So that was interesting, and then the creatures themselves were also pretty interesting. Yeah. So overall, I'd say this one was good.
Yeah.
Next up is Resurrection of the Daleks. Technically another two-parter, though the same length as a four-parter. This one was also good. Especially when compared to the last Dalek episode, which was Destiny of the Daleks. I know there are people that like Destiny of the Daleks. I just find that one to be so mind-numbingly boring. But with this one, it's more interesting. You have the sort of Dalek troops because, you know, they're hurting after the war with the Movellans and everything, and they're trying to find... they're trying to get Davros back so he can develop a cure, basically, so that they are not affected by the Dalek virus. So that stuff is interesting. We get the return of Davros, who, even though he's best in the original episode, he's still pretty interesting in this one. Yeah. And there is the great talk between Davros and the Doctor, where he says, you know, where they talk about, well, I want to give emotions to the Daleks so they can understand things, and the Doctor says, well, you just want that so they can become more efficient killers. And he says, well, isn't every civilization like that? Don't they eventually rise to empire? What makes the Daleks so very different? But so I like that, the debate there, and Peter Davison plays it very well. So overall, this was a good Dalek story.
And, as mentioned in the comments, and I think we made a comment too, although we didn't do the actual count, probably the deadliest, bloodiest episode in the 20-some-odd year history, because somebody said there's like more than 70 people who die in these two episodes.
I think Peter Davison fondly says that this has a higher body count than the Terminator. So... and this was also, I didn't put it in the thumbnail, but this was the end of Tegan. Not that she didn't die, but she left at the end. So I guess this can be our...
But that... go ahead. No, sorry.
Well, just our retrospective of Tegan as a character.
This finally showed the character that she should have been showing the entire time she was on there. When she looks around, literally at the destruction, and goes, I can't take this anymore. Yeah. This isn't fun. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. I can't do this anymore. And she says, I'm staying here. You know, it's 1984. I'll go find my grandfather, my cousin, whoever it was. Yeah. And she says, I'm going to stay. I can't do this. If she had ever really shown that in the rest of her tenure, she might have been a more interesting character. But it's, again, I never quite understood what that character, not the actress, but what that character brought to Doctor Who. It made no sense based on other successful companions in the past.
Yeah. And a lot of times, especially like in her first season, there were like every episode basically started with her yelling at the Doctor and crying, oh, you said you would get me home and we're not. She'd go sulk off, and then the episode would actually start and everything. But, you know, we talked about Sarah Jane at the beginning of this. Sarah Jane's first episode with the Sontaran, she like rallies the medieval, you know, villagers to go and kill the Doctor. And that's just amazing that Sarah Jane can just do that. And that's just a good lead-in to the character that Sarah Jane will have. Yeah. But Tegan, and especially in that first season, just had nothing to do. And yes, part of it is the things to do are either split up to Adric or Nyssa, but then even after that, you know, like there's not much when it's just her and Nyssa. There's not much when it's her and Turlo. She just doesn't get anything. I don't dislike Tegan, but it's clearly just they don't know what to do with Tegan.
Yeah. And we had talked about there's some continuity beginning in Doctor Who by this time, 20 years on. But it seems to me that if you're going to introduce a new character, a companion, when you introduce them, you should have an idea of where that story arc is going. All right? And I know in the 70s and 80s they would put in characters just to see how they would go. Apparently in Happy Days, Arthur Fonzarelli was only supposed to be a minor character in one or two episodes, and then he literally took over the show. But if you're going to put in a character like Tegan, who is an airline hostess, stewardess, whatever they're calling them nowadays, what does she bring? What is she going to add? How is she going to interact? And if you've only got that for one or two episodes and that doesn't work out, then don't keep her past 1 or 2 episodes. Let her go, or him, or whoever.
Yeah.
But if you don't have an idea in mind of where you're going with this character, then you don't understand how television works, how scripted series television works.
At least with that, like, an airline attendant or whatever, it's like, you would think that she should have some level of, like, control. She can look at a situation, and, if there's a bunch of people there, she can sort of take control, keep people calm, keep things in line, Maybe she doesn't know all this weird scientific alien mumbo-jumbo that's going on, but she can keep some things under control while the Doctor goes and solves the bigger, alien aspects of the episode.
Yeah.
And that could be interesting, and maybe that would have happened if they hadn't, kind of brought in Nyssa at the last second, and then, kept Adric as long as they did. So, like, I could see what they could do with Tegan, but they really just didn't do anything. No. She got possessed by a snake twice, like, other than that, it's like, I don't know. And it's a shame, because I like Tegan, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So, next up was Planet of Fire, our introduction to Perry and our exit for Turlough.
I thought the wrap-up of Turlough's story was good. I still think that somewhere early on they needed to have hinted a little bit more that he was an exile or a runaway or something, so that we could have been wondering all this time, what's his game plan? What's his end?
Yeah.
But again, I think when they introduced him, they didn't have any idea of where he was going.
See, I don't know, because they set up the beginning of his story is a very involved story, because he is tied to the Black Guardian. He has this, 3 stories where he's trying to kill the Doctor until eventually he is freed from the Black Guardian's control. And then after that, they just kind of vaguely hint, oh, maybe he's an alien. Okay, well, that's weird. Why was he, at a British boys' school in the 80s? And, we get a little bit of like, well, here's what might have happened to his planet with the Tractators, but it's not until this story that we really get just anything about who he could be, basically. So, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, I at the very least, I think that they thought we're going to do something with this character. We don't know what, but we want to do something a bit more with him as a companion. Which they did. It worked for the most part, but it hadn't been planned out. They just had that idea, basically. Yeah. So.
Now, Perry, daughter of an archaeologist?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
By the way, if we didn't say this last week, I finally looked up Lanzarote. I thought Lanzarote was an island in the Mediterranean. Apparently it's off the coast of Portugal, western Spain, somewhere out there in the Azores, Canary Islands area. But again, here is supposedly an American girl, which has a whole dynamic in and of itself in the 1980s. At least she's not, like a valley girl.
That's true.
Being the daughter of an archaeologist and someone who knows something about archaeology, that sets her up to be somebody who actually can contribute to what the Doctor is doing. But we're going to have to wait and see, because
I really hope so. And you know how when we watched The Five Doctors again and we were like, oh yeah, Turlough's in this story. Why don't I remember Turlough being in this story originally? We kind of have a similar thing where we're about to come up on Vengeance on Varos again with the Sixth Doctor. And it's like, oh yeah, Perry's in that story. What did Perry do in that story? I cannot remember for the life of me. So, yeah, like, at this point, we don't have enough to go on with Perry, and we'll talk more about Perry, I guess, once we do the Sixth Doctor retrospective and we have more of her episodes. But I don't know, like, I'm seeing almost another Tegan. She doesn't complain as much, but like another sort of damsel in distress, and it's like I want a bit more than that.
But in Planet of Fire, she I mean, she was walking over the landscape, just running away. She showed some athleticism or stamina or whatever, some gumption that I never thought Tegan had. And again, she's probably not as smart as Nyssa, but she seems to me that she will be more actively involved in the Sixth Doctor than Tegan or Edric were with the fourth and fifth.
Yeah, and it's also just a weird trend that the past 3 girls we've had have all been introduced in episodes with the Master. Now that I think about it, but honestly, she did kind of hold her own with the Master and Chameleon. I guess we could talk about Chameleon too as a companion. He happened, and then he died,
and then he didn't happen.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like Planet of Fire works for Perry, but I'm ready to see. I hope there's more with Perry. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, but overall, a very good story and a good send off for Turlough.
Yeah.
So.
And then
we've caught up to the Caves of Androzani,
which the fandom has said is one of the best, if not the best, of episodes of all time, but certainly one of the best of the Six Doctors. And again, I think Perry does a lot, aside from being poisoned, but she does a lot before that, and of course the whole end of the story hinges on he decides to give her the antidote instead of himself. But on top of this, you've got this creepy villain who looks like I think we were making jokes about Phantom of the Opera, and it also occurred to me later on that his leather suit, I mean, that's like some bondage and sadomasochism stuff.
It's probably It's probably from the same inspiration of like Edward Scissorhands or something, which I guess might have been around the same time, honestly.
But and his fixation, his absolute, I must have Perry. She's so beautiful to look at, and although he never says he wants to keep her for purposes of mating with her or anything, that seemed to be the impression, that he was going to keep her there as his companion, as his actual mate. So, and again, for 12, 13, 14-year-olds, that was probably they were going, what is this guy up to? What is this? It's so weird.
It is also kind of weird because, we kind of establish with Planet of Fire, because that's the episode where everyone's wardrobes just decreased by 50%. And the way we're pretty much introduced to Perry is, jumping off that boat in a bikini and, trying to swim to the shore and everything. And so it's like establishing, like, okay, hopefully we will do stuff with her. She will be a defined character, but she's clearly meant to get some eyeballs on the screen. And so to immediately go from that to, here's this really creepy dude creeping out over her. It's like, okay, that's a weird, like, sort of tangent. It almost makes me wonder if maybe they got a studio note or just someone, and then the writer of this was like, oh, okay, so she's supposed to be, she's supposed to be the hot young girl with the Doctor. It's like, okay, well, I'll just take that and I'll just incorporate that into the plot. And I will say, it's interesting also just watching, for good reason, how protective the Doctor is of her, always stepping between her and Jack, basically. Like, I always enjoyed that, even though she doesn't know her at all. So,
and there was a whole subplot, although I'm sure many people would consider it the main plot, of authoritarianism and capitalism, and it turns out that the leader of the government is corrupt and the leader of the corporation is corrupt, and it's like there's practically no good guys here.
Yeah. So all of that was also interesting. You had the gun runners too, and the various androids. I would say this is probably up there in terms of the best episodes. I don't know if I can quite put it at number 1, but it's up there, definitely. So, and it is a good send-off for Peter Davison and a good choice for the Doctor, that he would give the antidote to Perry, and I like the distinction too, because he genuinely doesn't know if this is going to kill him or if he's going to regenerate.
Yeah.
So not knowing, because it would be a simple thing to be like, well, yes, I gave you the antidote because I can get this out of my system and just got to change the face, regenerate, and I'll be all good. But the fact that he doesn't know if that'll happen is better for the Doctor's character, that he would just, without any question, give this to her, and, he'll just lay there and be like, well, if I regenerate, that's great. If not, well, I saved Perry at least. So,
now, I know that before we watched this, there were several people who said that he had picked up 2 vials of the bat's milk and dropped one. When he's carrying her and the vials back to the TARDIS, though, they really didn't make a huge thing out of him dropping the 1 vial and it breaking it. He could have looked at it and realized he still only had 1, but because when he starts the journey back to the TARDIS, he's got the 2 vials, but when he gets back, he's only got the 1. And I vaguely remember him stumbling, but I don't remember him specifically dropping the extra vial of the antidote. So, just a minor thing. Again, as a director, I would have made a little bit more out of the fact that we would see him drop the 1 and then realize, oh, I've got to save her. So. And then Colin Baker pops up just as snotty as he was when he was the, what was he, the Castellan?
Yeah, something like that.
And he pops up and goes, oh, who were you expecting? And she said, what's going on? Change. And it seemed not a moment too soon. She's like, seriously?
He comes out the gate swinging.
Yeah.
And it's one of those because, especially in modern Doctor Who, where once you get the regeneration, it is just this, it's always whiplash, where it's like, we just had this big, heartfelt goodbye to this Doctor. We're basically in mourning of this character that has died. And then they switch, and it's the weirdest scene you could possibly think of with this new guy. And you're like, who's this guy? What happened to the guy I liked, But there, it's just like, there's just something about the way he comes out, and she's like, I, and it's like, it's 3 eyes in one breath. You're a very egotistical young lady. It's like, dude, what are you doing? So,
this is probably the most abrupt of the regenerations. Because, again, Troughton took some time to get his bearings and realize what was happening. Pertwee stumbled out of the TARDIS and fainted and had to be taken to the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Baker jumps up and realizes what's happening and, again, goes in and changes costume several times before he finally comes out. But, again, it's not an abrupt change of personality. And then from Baker to
Davison,
he was already expecting that because the ghost, the shapeless little white figure, had been following him for a while. And then the Doctor takes 2 or 3 episodes or parts of the episode to finally figure out who he is and goes into the regeneration room or whatever it is. But this one is like just boom, sits up, hello, I'm the new Doctor, get over it. Like, okay.
Well, and also too, just like they've never had the new Doctor talk immediately after the regeneration in that episode. Like they always save their first lines for the next episode.
Yeah. And this wasn't even the end of the season.
It's not. There's still another story in this season, which we'll get to in time. So. And we'll be rightfully comparing it to Power of the Daleks, to everyone's annoyance. So yeah, like it was a very, very much a whiplash moment with him, but I kind of get the feeling that's just the 6th Doctor in a nutshell. He's a very whiplash Doctor. So, but that's it. That's 20 stories. Oh, we've been going for an hour. I knew. Like, that's the thing. I'm always like, well, this isn't going to take as long. Like, it probably won't be as long of a video. But the fact that we're just talking just non-stop in this video, it's like, I've got nothing to edit out.
There's,
so
5 minutes of British and American military history there. Sorry about that. You can skip over that part.
But at the very least, this is still about an hour shorter than the Tom Baker video. So that's something. And I get the feeling the next time is going to be even shorter because I don't think Colin Baker has that many episodes.
He only did 2 seasons, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, you got anything else?
I got nothing.
Well, that is basically it. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the Twin Dilemma, With all of that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist with all of our classic Doctor Who reactions, as well as another playlist with all of my modern Doctor Who reactions if you want to go check this out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.